Everybody, welcome to the Wellness Crusaders. Today we are talking about allies and assassins for your mental health. I'm joined with my beautiful co-host, Patti Reese. And before we begin, I'm going to read our mission statement, and then Patti will go over our disclaimer. So our mission is to educate and empower you to make informed choices for your health, the health of our children, our communities, and our earth. We are committed to fostering a world where the balance between human health and environmental stewardship is respected and nurtured. Join us in this holistic and transformative journey as we work together to create a healthier, more harmonious world for all. Please join our crusade.
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome everybody that's listening in or listening in down the road. And just a little disclaimer. Listeners understand that the role of the health coach is not to prescribe or assess micro or macronutrient levels, provide healthcare, medical, or nutrition therapy services, or to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease, condition, or other physical, mental ailment of the human body. Rather, the coach is a mentor and a guide who has been trained in holistic health coaching to help clients positive, sustainable lifestyle changes. The listener understands that we do not act in the capacity of a doctor, licensed dietitian, nutritionist, psychologist, or other licensed registered professional, and that any advice given by the coach is not meant to take the place of advice by these professionals. If the listener is under the care of a healthcare professional or currently using prescription medications, the client should discuss any dietary changes or potential dietary supplements use with his or her doctor, and should not discontinue any prescription medications without first consulting his or her doctor. The listener understands that the information mentioned in our talk should not be seen as medical or nursing advice and is not meant to take the place of health professionals. There.
So Patti is frozen. No. Oh. So you get me for a moment. Just 1 second while we try to get this fixed. I don't know if she knows she's frozen or not.
Hey, Jess, it's Lori. Do you want to, while Dwayne is working on getting Patty's technical difficulty resolved, let's talk a little bit about what you both are going to be talking about tonight. So what's an ally for the listeners out there?
So an ally is something that's good. It's our friend. It is something that is going to help feed our brain, our psychological abilities, and feed our body as well. So
can you give me an example?
Well, like food. Food is one that will help to feed our brain so that we can have a healthy brain, mentality, mental health. So, but we want to make sure it's nutritious food. And then also amino acids.
Oh, that's interesting for the listeners who don't understand amino acids. what would be like an example of an amino acid? We maybe just talk about one quick one that would affect maybe emotional health.
So a good one is we talk a lot about it on the show, actually. 5-HTP is one that's going to help with serotonin. So that is a really good one to help with depression, anxiety, those ruminating thoughts, the overwhelm, the sleepless nights, insomnia, the waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep. That is going to be a sign of low serotonin. So 5-HTP is going to be one that can also help reduce suicidal thoughts and ideations. And I know that for you, Lori, you don't like you use different terminology, you use anxious and sad thoughts instead of the anxiety and the depression.
You know what, Jess, I do. And part of the reason is because I think in modern day conventional medicine, modern day psychiatry, that I find that teenagers, young adults, older adults can make a trip to, let's just even say, their general practitioner, and maybe that general health practitioner has never went back to school to learn the compartments of the brain and how amino acids can support it. And so I think what ends up happening is there's so many people that walk out feeling labeled. They're labeled with that, like you have anxiety, or you have depression, or you have like antisocial personality. And most of them out there, really, they're not talking about, the root cause being what you were talking about, like nutrition. And so that's why I really don't like those two words. So I do tend to use anxious and sad. But it looks like our beautiful colleague is back. So I'm just going to bow out here until we talk about brain spect imaging.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you, Lori. Welcome back. Welcome back, Miss.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure what I missed, but I was starting to talk about marijuana.
Well, we lost you when you started going over the disclaimer. So.
Oh, wow. That was a long time because I was sitting on there going, oh, am I by myself?
I know, I'm like, did I lose my connection or is it Patty? Whose is it? What's going on?
Well,
so Lori jumped on for a moment and we were just trying to talk about what allies versus assassins really are. What's an ally? And so we talked about nutrition and amino acids, and we talked a little bit about 5-HTP.
Oh,
how it can
wonderful.
Anxious and sad thoughts and why Lori doesn't like that. So now it's back to us.
Okay, well, let's continue with the allies and then we can talk about the assassins. But sometimes they're mixed together, right? And I think that's where we're going to see some overlap, because I know that when I was going to start talking about my marijuana use, it was my ally, right? So I want our audience and listeners to look at what might be what you consider your ally right now. Is it really doing what you want it to do? And is there another or a better way? And I certainly found that out with my marijuana use for, 35 years. It was certainly my ally, but I had no idea about nutrition, about amino acid therapy, as Lori and you were just talking about, even meditation. I was, all I know was that weed was helping me calm down and sometimes clean my house well. Which not everybody has that response, but whatever your drug is that you use, it either kind of can lift you up or calm you down, and it depends on your brain and your biochemistry.
That's really interesting that you said that. So you smoked for 35 years, 35 years, but then you said it gave you the energy to be able to focus.
Right.
And so Dr. Huberman actually talks a lot about that, how marijuana can do that. And it's because what it's doing is it's activating the prefrontal cortex and hushing the amygdala. And when it hushes the amygdala, you're not in that fight or flight, and now you're more in the prefrontal cortex. But then what it's doing is teetering back and forth, and it's throwing off this imbalance between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So 35 years. Why?
Well, it might be longer. I was just trying to do the math.
Patty.
So, who cares if it's a little longer?
Oh, you little hippie woman, you.
I was a hippie woman. And here's the deal. I kid about, well, I don't kid about it, but I'm lighter about it now because my marijuana was organic, right? I'm like, well, I'm going to get really clean sourced, especially when I was a health coach. I was still smoking weed when I was a certified health coach. And I'm like, well, I'll make sure I get that organic, no pesticides on my weed, right? And true enough, we do, if you are smoking, you probably do want to do that. but it's a contradiction, right? And for me, it was like, well, why am I smoking weed? Because I am anxious. And Jess, you and I talked a little bit about this afternoon. We're like, oh, who said it's not addictive? That is BS. It is so addictive because I couldn't wake up without it. I couldn't. I mean, my day just didn't flow.
Yeah.
Now I eat protein and I do aminos and I meditate and, it's the natural high remedy. How wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and you said that it was helping with your anxiety, but it was also giving you anxiety because it does over time. And so how counterproductive is that? You're using it to cope with the anxiety, but yet it's increasing your anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is addictive. It is. I loved smoking weed. I loved it so much. And like you said, yeah, I would wake up in the morning and I would start with it first thing in the morning, and I smoked it all day long. And sometimes I'd go smoking it all night long as well without sleep because I just loved it. To the point where I was stealing money to support that habit. And so, yeah, people say it's not addictive. Bull crap. Both of us were addicted to it.
Right. And so that's, wow, that's a long time through the day to smoke, right? But that's where the ally becomes the assassin, right? So this is for everybody to look at, whatever that is, whether it's weed, whether it's soda, sugar. I mean, I still have to watch sugar for myself. It's, and I do eat sweet things, but I have to watch, the chocolate and some of the things I just want to, go back to. And I go back to it when I'm not dialing in my self-care. Because if I'm not eating well during the day, I'm going to go to sugar. I'm just going to, and then I'm not going to stop that easily. And I'm just like, okay, gotta make sure I get in what I need to feed the brain. So that's part of it. The brain is looking for something, and weed is marijuana, weed, alcohol, sugar, starch. And then we can get into a lot of other, medicines. There's some of the plant medicines too that a lot of people are using medicinally. So they're calling it medicinally. And there are some, and there's lots of clinics around the country that are using, microdosing and ketamine and DMT, other things that are helping people with their mental health. And I just want to talk about it a little bit because for some, under a clinical setting, it may be really helpful. And I know there's probably people listening that it's been really helpful for. But this is not a regular use substance. And this is a substance used in a clinical setting that really needs to be monitored. And what I have seen with some of my dearest friends, they keep going back and going back. And so what happens to, and we all know this being trained in the brain, is that your neurotransmitters get dysregulated. They may open something up. And listen, weed did that for me. I didn't have to go to ayahuasca or some of the other stuff because weed kind of opened up that that space where I was like, oh, okay, life is okay. Life is going to be, I'm okay. I'm relaxed. I can feel that connection, maybe to spirit or with God or whatever you're connecting with, until it stopped working, because eventually you keep down regulating, right? We're shooting up with whatever substance it is, whether it's weed or ayahuasca or wine or sugar, and then down it goes. And then we need more, and up it goes, and down it goes. And we're in that addictive pattern where the allies come in and they feed the neurotransmitters, they feed our brain. So we're like, oh, I feel happy again. I woke up happy again.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up balanced, or even neutral is better than depressed and anxious.
Right.
I'm not always waking up happy, but there's a difference about having serenity again, because we're supposed to feel good. We're supposed to have serenity. We're supposed to even feel grief and not numb out about it.
Well, it's our gift, right? Those emotions are our gift to be able to experience this physical body, this physical experience and this time. And it's also like the grief is our gift for having loved that person so much. And yeah, we are supposed to feel those things. I love what you said, though, about people are continuing to use these substances because the substance, they're using that as a Band-Aid, or they're saying they're going and they're experiencing this and they are getting that high effect. And that is like stimulating the endorphins and stimulating the opiate receptors. And of course, you're going to feel great from this product for a temporary period of time until it wears off and until you get back to real life. And you're trying to deal with things from a sober perspective, but yet now you've depleted those neurotransmitters. And when we deplete those neurotransmitters, you have to replenish them. And the way that you replenish them is through the protein and taking the free form aminos.
Right.
Talked about.
Right.
And
sure.
And yes, there is a time and there is a place for these things. And we're going to do an incredible episode talking about ketamine at the end of this month.
Mm-hmm.
And looking really forward to that, because we're doing a lot of research on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be with all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think one of the things, as you were talking about that, is, we do need to address trauma, and there is wonderful trauma support out there. And a lot of, I know a lot of the use of some of the microdosing and other things in therapeutic settings, and even in some shamanic settings, right, are to help with trauma. But there again, that's a door that's opening that could be very dangerous for someone who's not trained in trauma response. So I want to say that out to our listeners too, just to be very mindful of where you're going to do a journey or who you're journeying with. And I've heard of a lot of really difficult things and tragedies around it as well too, and ahas. I have a friend, and I would never mention any names. She actually was in recovery for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and she was still miserable. Now, she didn't know about the nutrition piece, so that's part of her misery. But when she went into her plant medicine that she went through with in a very clinical shamanic setting, it was a safe setting for her. She had an experience where she was able to connect and go, oh my gosh, the missing piece is nutrition. And she went and studied nutrition from that experience. So that experience for her was a wonderful one, right? Because she got to go, oh my goodness, I need to study nutrition. I need to feed my brain. And in fact, she was at one of our trainings for the academy, learning our level 1 training. And that's how I learned about her story. So it's all personalized, right? That she had a great story. Others didn't have great stories. So once again, like how are you caring for your brain? And is that what you actually need? And if you are in recovery, it's a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're substituting heroin and then all of a sudden you're doing, ayahuasca more regularly, what's going on up here?
Well, yeah, what's going on with that? And then
Right.
you're continuing to activate those opiate receptors and act. When Charles, my husband, who overdosed, who died, who lost his life to heroin, when we were going to treatment, his psychiatrist it was his psychologist said to him, because he kept relapsing on marijuana, and his psychologist said, you are continuing to keep those opiate receptors firing.
Right.
And eventually that high is not going to be enough. And he said, it's going to end up being the death of you or the death of Jessica. And it did end up being the death of my husband, because that high from marijuana was not enough. He kept on activating. He kept on smoking it. He'd have these little relapses with marijuana. And people don't think that if you're smoking marijuana, it's a relapse. When you are an opiate addict, or you're any other addict, cocaine addict, alcohol addict, whatever addict you are, marijuana is addictive. Marijuana does fire the brain. It does activate the opiate receptors. It does make you crave those increased highs once you've had an increased high. And it makes you wonder what it would be like to try this other substance too. Because I remember for me, when I started smoking it, my brain was like, oh, why is everybody saying this is so bad for me? It makes me feel so good. How could something that makes me feel so good be so bad for me? Right. And so then from there, I started trying meth, and I tried cocaine, and trying LSD and psilocybin and whatever it was that I could get my hands on, because this marijuana was my ally and it was good for me. And everybody else was the assassin. All the people that were telling me it was wrong, they were my assassins. They were trying to make what was so good for me. And yeah, this is where it gets so convoluted. And why people have such a hard time getting off of their substance too, is because then it becomes their friend in this protection. Right? They're trying to protect that because it makes them feel good. Dr. Amen actually does a lot of brain SPECT images regarding healthy brains and the addicted brains, or people that have even eaten unhealthy. And he did a study with one of his friends, and he helped his friend get his brain back to healthy. Then his friend decided he was going to go and do this ayahuasca ceremony. And when he came back, he did a brain SPECT image, and it was destroyed. All the work that they had done was
Whoa, really?
So I want to bring Lori in, because Lori has expertise in looking at these images. And Lori, can you please explain to us the difference between this healthy brain on the left and the brain on the right, which is a marijuana user's brain?
So you had some great explanations on, especially for marijuana, as a gateway drug. And there are really so many people still today that are smoking marijuana. And like you said, Jess, it ends up leading to other things. And most of it, like Patti was saying, it's coping skills. They just don't know how to cope with everyday stressors. And even a lot of the rehabs that people end up going to, the coaching that they get in rehabs, they always make it sound like once they get out of a 30 or a 40-day rehab, that life is going to be good. But they really, so many of them just don't teach them, like, hey, sometimes when you walk out of a rehab, you don't have a car, you don't have a job, your family's abandoned you, your wife's divorcing you, your husband's divorcing you, you've lost your kids, and all of a sudden reality, kicks in. And it's just so easy for them to slip back into an old routine because they haven't been taught to feed their brain. They haven't been taught about amino acids, which all three of us are so super passionate about amino acids. And Kathleen, our other colleague, is passionate about some of the aminos that come from the soil. But, we've got the brain spec imaging up. So on the left side, and for the listeners out there that are only listening and you don't have us in front of you, we would be happy to send you some of these images. If one, you're struggling yourself, or you have a family member, or you have a teenager who is struggling, we would be happy to share these documents with you. But this is the brain spec on the left is the surface scan. So that is looking at the top of the brain. And what we're looking at this is the circumference of the brain. On that brain spec, the color means absolutely nothing. But you can see how it's the sides of it, like there's no scalloping in this at all. And that you see just a little bit of divots, and that's just the blood flow. But then you see the brain speck on the right. So the brain speck on the right is the underneath of the brain. So when you look at the surface scan on the left, the right side of the brain is the right side. But then what happens when you flip this brain speck over, your right side then becomes the opposite side of this. That's why when you're looking at both of these images, it's important to know that this is the underside of the brain. In this underside of the brain, you can see that the circumference of the brain is not even, that it's got a lot of scalloping and it's got a lot of toxicity. So what happens in marijuana, and even in organic marijuana, Patty, there are still chemicals and other toxins. There could be up to 4,000 different toxins. And we know that it's crossing the blood-brain barrier because when you smoke marijuana, you feel a high. So depending on, where the marijuana is sticking, because it's not always the opiate receptors, it's not always the CBD receptors in the brain. It's also going into the compartments of the brain. One in particular is called the basal ganglia, and we have two of them. In the basal ganglia compartment is the fear, fight, flight, spin, freeze. So you're chemically altering this brain. And if your brain is already chemically imbalanced, and maybe it's chemically imbalanced because, one, you've been smoking marijuana for a long time, and so now the compartments of the brain are damaged, and you're not able to create enough of the amino acids, enough of the neurotransmitters that the brain needs to function. And so what happens is you have a malfunctioning piece of hardware in the brain that's not operating. And then you see the big divots in the brain, which is really lack of blood flow. So go back to the compartment called the basal ganglia, which is your fear, fight, flight, freeze, spin. And if the blood flow drops in those compartments, your anxious thoughts get better. And just you and I were talking, I don't like to use the word anxiety because I feel people get labeled with these emotional issues that they have. So you are more anxious. You could possibly be more fearful. You could possibly be where you don't have a lot of social skill sets, because what has happened is that the marijuana and the chemicals, the toxins from the marijuana are damaging the compartments. Now, can it be fixed? Can it be healed? It can. You can heal the brain. I mean, BDNF which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. Basically, your brain signals and pathways can be changed. You do grow up to 750 new brain neurons every single day, but you have to feed the brain, and you have to feed the brain the amino acids and nutrient dense foods. So we look at a toxic brain spec, and we can pretty much tell that there's toxicity in there because the chemicals are also harming the brain neurons. And I think one of the reasons that Dr. Amen puts a lot of his brain spec images out. I mean, I have literally thousands of images from the certification class that I took with him. It's going to harm other parts of the brain. And once the toxicity sets in and it starts damaging the circumference of the brain, those compartments cannot operate like a healthy brain.
Mm-mm. Wow. Thank you, Lori. That was very well shared.
Yeah.
And
That was,
you know, just to put that out there, it's, you know, the more that we can get out there about amino acids and nutrient dense foods, especially to the rehab places,
yep.
that's where the healing begins. Because even though you can understand what they're trying to teach you in the rehab, I mean, a majority of the people out there know right from wrong. But I can say, out of all of the coaching that I've done, that I have never had one single client that said, "Oh my gosh, Lori, I am so excited for tomorrow morning so I can be an addict or I can be an alcoholic."
Yep.
No one wants to wake up and say that. And it's a shame that there aren't more facilities out there teaching what we are trying to educate our listeners on.
Well, that's why we're here, though. We're here to educate people and share some of the coaching work that we do and recommend facilities that are, because you're right, there are hardly any facilities that are doing it because it's medical assisted treatment. So most people are going to rehab and they're getting put on another drug. I see it all the time, every week, and it breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a treatment center here, and I mean, I'm talking aminos, but they're getting medication. So it is an education process, and I think that the treatment centers that are looking at it, God bless them, because they're going to really help people change their lives. And I talk about it because I teach nutrition and meditation, and I'm like, okay, well, here's the deal. You've got to eat protein. And if you continue to eat this stuff, so it really is people's choices too, even in the treatment center, because, they can make the choice to go, oh, I'm going to eat more protein and I'm going to feel better. I'm going to start eating more vegetables, and that's the other part, right? They're eating non-food. So, but there is such hope. And, when you were talking, Lori, and I'm looking at that brain, I'm like, that was my brain. And I literally thought I have really created so much brain damage. I mean, I felt mentally ill, and I couldn't even put a sentence together. I mean, I had alcohol involved too toward the end of my addiction role. But it was marijuana that was my main, drug of choice. And that was scary. And yet, I'm 19 years sober now, and I'm like, I'm smarter than I was at 25. And I didn't think I was, because my brain was just so off between sugar and weed and alcohol and trauma. So there is hope, but we must take the steps to feed our brain. And this is the missing link in our education system. We should be teaching young people about how to feed their brain and not just saying no. They're going to say no when they feel good.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happens with children. So in children, when they start using as teenagers, because it's more readily available, right? It's more readily available now because it is legal and you can get it in some smoke shops in different states. And they've got, the dab pens now that they can easily use and that they can hide. And they're just smoking at rates that are so high that we've never seen these rates before. And what is it doing to their lungs? What is it doing to their minds, especially as not their minds, their brain, because our mind and our brain are separate. And that's a whole other topic. But what is it doing to their brains as they're developing? There is Dr. Amen says that if somebody is using marijuana in their teenagers, have a 450% chance of developing a psychotic illness. 450% chance of developing a psychotic illness. And this is an outrage. Like, why do we have so many mentally ill people in their adult years? This could be one of the reasons, but also not having the nutrition that their brain needs either. There's a new thing, it's called scromating. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Patty. Do you know anything about scromating?
No.
So scromating is emergency rooms are seeing an increase in scromating, and what it is it's a combination of screaming and vomiting. It's marijuana poisoning.
It's called scromating.
Scromating. And so they have nausea. It provokes excessive vomiting, abdominal pain, sweating, dehydration. They'll have a decrease in weight loss. And so this is marijuana poisoning. There is marijuana poisoning that can happen. Everybody, or the common myth or the common belief is that marijuana is safe. It's not safe. And in fact, a treatment center that I was talking to today was telling me that they have clients who have marijuana psychosis.
Yes.
They see clients that have marijuana psychosis, and it's because of the genetic polymorphism. So that's a whole other thing that people are not talking about, is that some people are predisposed to having different reactions to these medications or these plant medicines or these alternative treatments that is nobody's looking at. Nobody's looking at this. And there is, what's his name? He's the one who did all the research on psychedelics. What's his name? It's drawing a blank, but he said there's an 8 to 10% chance of having a psychotic episode from using psychedelics.
Wow.
And nobody's talking about this stuff.
Right.
Nobody's talking about this.
Well, that's why we're having a conversation. And this is, part of our mission is to educate and to give people alternatives to what they've been doing that has become an assassin, to their brain, and man, if our brains are not working well, we're not working well. Everything starts to fall apart, including our health. Oh, Dr. Griffith?
Yeah, Roland Griffith. Yes, that's who it is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's cool. Did you say he's a psychiatrist?
He was in charge of doing the psychedelic research. So I don't know exactly what his credentials are, but he did a lot of research regarding psychedelics and the treatment for mental illnesses.
Well, and I honor that opening because they're looking for help for mental illness, which is fabulous. But what I really want to honor are the people who are doing orthomolecular nutrition for mental illness. And that is, one of the founders of that is Carl Pfeiffer. He was a medical doctor I think he was from New Jersey, and a lot of people trained underneath him. And he had a clinic back in New Jersey. He was treating schizophrenia. He was treating bipolar. And even though those are labels, I also see them as identifications because they help people get support. I just want to throw that out there because I've had discussions with people about labeling and it's an identification. I look at it as an identification, and I have a special ed degree. So it's like, oh, okay, well, you have ADD. So you might need to get, or be in a resource room to get the services you need. So with that being said, people are walking out without a schizophrenia diagnosis anymore. Come on. They're in a mental institution They're being fed nutrition, they're learning meditation, they're working through trauma, and they are walking out with no more schizophrenia. That is mind-blowing to me.
It is mind-blowing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and talking about schizophrenia, like that is one of the number one things that ages our brain.
Yes.
So it's one of the number one things that ages our brain. But guess what? The second thing is that ages our brain.
Stress.
Marijuana.
Ooh. Oh. I'm glad I stopped.
I'm glad you stopped too after all those 30s.
And you too.
Me too.
Well, I'm glad we both stopped.
Yeah. You know that it's so crazy. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, you know, we didn't know, you didn't know. So here we are. Now we know, and that's the information we're delivering. And we just want to let you know, everybody, that we are brought to you by KMMU, Main Street Media. We are live on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, and our website is kmmu.org. So please follow us. There's a lot of other great shows on this channel. Thank you, KMMU, for letting us have a voice and talking about weed.
Yes. And all the controversial stuff.
Yes, and the alternatives to it too, which is awesome. So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jess.
No, I was gonna say, let's talk about like the toxins, that how people are not even considering that, and that the THC content is higher.
Ooh. Oh yes, and I mean, there's a lot of research out there on it too. So you know, we're not pulling it up right now, but there's so much. The THC levels have skyrocketed for quite some time now. So I know in the 70s, and you know, that's when I first started, and it was like, you know, the THC levels were, I think, like 11%. Now they're up to 85%. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so that's the super herb, you know, the super THC, and that is like, your brain cannot really handle that. And then you add in, you know, whatever they're growing, and like even Lori said about, you know, even if it is organic pot, you're still having this high level of THC, which is really so dangerous for the brain.
So dangerous for the brain. Yeah. And then that could be causing some of the psychotic episodes as well, and the marijuana poisoning. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're treating it a lot like it's heroin, right? It's just this hybrid. So they're changing it. They're changing it from its natural structure now.
Right.
And messing with it. They're pretty much genetically modifying it, if you think about it like that.
Well, it's like the modification of food. They're doing the same thing with weed, you know, and it is really, it's GMO weed. This is exactly right.
It's GMO weed.
It's GMO. Are you smoking GMO weed? So yeah, there's no question about it. And, you know, there is some value. And I know that it's a, you know, and I remember thinking to myself, well, Mother Earth is growing this. It's got to be okay. Right. And sure enough, there are benefits to that. I mean, if you think of the plant, I mean, I use hemp seeds on probably every day for my protein and omega-3 fat. It's one of the best plant proteins by far on the planet. The oil, the clothing, there's so many good things, and the CBD value of it. You know, there is some value in that CBD really working on the endocannabinoids, but it's the THC that is throwing us into the psychosis and into this, you know, these imbalances in the brain. So I just wanted to address that there are some positive allies to that plant.
Yeah, well, and marijuana is good for use with seizures.
Yes.
And end of life treatment.
Yes.
End of life care for cancer patients.
Yes.
Because it helps them to reduce their pain and helps with their appetite. So there is a time and there is a place. However, smoking it every single day is not the time and the place.
No.
And
Well, when you were talking about for cancer, when my sister was passing of cancer, she hated weed, because it made her paranoid, right? So here she is dying of cancer, and she didn't want to have any more paranoia.
yeah,
So it wasn't something for her. So again, it may not be for your loved ones. I mean, you can check it out and see if it works for them, but depending on their brain, they may react with more fear to it than more as a relaxant. So I think that's where the CBD would come in, because the CBD relaxes more, and there are actually really great aminos and herbs that can help relax more too, that don't have any, mind altering side effects for people who are in chronic disease. They already have some fear going on, so just I would be mindful about that, because my sister hated it.
yeah,
She
yep,
said it was supposed to help her, and she's like, no, I don't like it. It scares me. So
yeah, yep. So we have a video. I'd like to show that now. Dwayne, can you bring that video up? Dwayne.
I'll have it up for you in just a minute.
thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well, I do want to talk before the video comes on, maybe after, about edibles, because I know a lot of people are doing edibles, and it's not, I mean, yeah, maybe it's not harming your lungs, but it sure is harming your gut, which is directly connected to your brain. Okay, here we go.
I'm just going to adjust the audio so that you guys can all hear it. Hang on.
So this is a video with Dr. Amen and Drew Purohit. I don't know how to say his last name exactly, but Dr. Amen is who Lori is a certified coach through.
Mhm.
And
I believe you wanted this to start at 36 minutes, right?
37. Yep, 37 and play till 40.
Okay, here it comes. Let's see if we can hear it.
It looks like it's muted, Dwayne.
A lot, and then also talked about Thibin inside.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about these things just because you brought them up right now. So marijuana, for those that are not familiar with your content, is the primary place that your biggest concern is around is, again, going back to restricting the blood flow to the brain. What you're seeing when you do these scans?
So I published a study on 1,000 marijuana users compared to healthy. Every area of their brain is lower in blood flow and activity. Every area. And then I did a study. I did the world's largest brain imaging study, 62,454 scans on how the brain ages. And it's fascinating. Little kids have very busy, active brains, sort of stabilizes around 25, 60, and then it's a slow march lower. And then we looked at, well, what accelerates aging? And we have this massive database using marijuana, using alcohol, using cigarettes, having diagnoses like depression or ADHD or schizophrenia. Schizophrenia aged the brain the most. But what shocked me is marijuana aged the brain the second most. And I'm like, well, that's not a good thing. And now, alcohol is not good, nicotine's not good for the brain, but why would I ever do anything that ages my brain? The second thing, and I'm also a child psychiatrist, and I've known for a long time that marijuana in adolescence is bad for the developing brain. It demotivates kids. If I had a 14-year-old who all of a sudden has ADD, but they didn't have ADD when they were 12, I'm like, you need to pee in the cup. I mean, you needed to do a drug screen. And marijuana was the most common offender. teenagers who smoke. And my big concern, as the perception of the dangerousness of the drug goes down, its use goes up. And now marijuana is everywhere. I mean, you live in LA, I live in Orange County, the pot dispensaries all over the place. It's good medicine. So teenagers are smoking at rates never seen before. But if you use marijuana as a teenager, you have a 450% increased risk of having a psychotic illness. In your 20s, if you smoke during adolescence, you have a higher incidence of anxiety disorders, depression, and suicide. Well, I'm not okay with this. And what's happening in your brain in your teens and early 20s? You're building the highways. I mean, they're getting myelinated, which means they're getting strengthened. They're going to go faster. And you're throwing poison in there, disrupting that, which may end up being a permanent disruption. So I'm like, just not on board with it. And I don't know if you remember during the presidential debates, during the Democratic presidential debates, someone asked then Vice President Biden,
Dwayne,
should the federal...
Have you had enough?
Yeah.
I think that's the end. Okay.
Thank you, Dwayne.
So what he was going to go on to say was that they'd asked President Biden to pretty much legalize it. And Biden had said there wasn't enough evidence behind it. And somebody came in and said, oh, but there is, and da, 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 da. And then that's when they started legalizing it. But just because something's legal doesn't mean that it's good for us.
Right. Exactly. Alcohol is legal. There's a lot of Mountain Dew is legal, although I just read this morning, as I shared with you, that in 30 countries, Mountain Dew is banned. Okay, that's something to look at, right? So why are we not banning marijuana and some of the other things? You know, this is where people get the education and then they make the choice. But if people are feeding their brain, if these young kids are feeding their brain and working through some of their trauma, they are, doing well. But if they're not, then this is what we're seeing. We're seeing psychosis, suicide, as Dr. Amen even talked about. It's like the developing brain. I talked to my nephews about it because they're young and smoking weed, and I'm like, guys, and I've talked to two of them have had anxiety issues, and I'm like, yeah, it's your weed and you're not eating real food. So bingo.
Yep. So let's talk about those gummies. We were going to talk about gummies.
Oh, yes. Well, they are really difficult on the gut lining. And so now they're coming in, because again, a lot of people don't want to smoke because smoking is not necessarily good for you. But here we're ingesting these gummies. And I know there's a whole host of things that are in the gummies that are coming in through their digestive tract now too. And it's much harder to regulate as well too, right? Well, I mean, I think smoking is probably hard to regulate too, how much you're getting in, depending on the strength of it. So I just think it's something we need to look at. If you already have some gut issues going on and now you're taking in a gummy, and then just things start going haywire through the gut and the vagus nerve up to the brain. So, we're looking at, a lot of that happening right now with the gummies. And I don't know if gummies are sold because I haven't been looking for them. If they're sold in, weed stores, do they sell gummies there? Who makes the gummies?
I don't know who makes them. I know of some people who go across the border to get some.
Okay.
But here's the gummy that they're selling in the smoke shops is Kratom.
Whoa, really? I didn't know that.
Kratom is a gummy, and Kratom is just as addictive as heroin.
Yes.
It's an opiate, and I do have clients that have become addicted to Kratom. And I have other coach friends who are working with their clients who are addicted to Kratom. So it is it's very serious and very scary that this is just readily available, where they're saying that it's meant to, sorry, have a puppy here.
I was like, is that your chair?
And now he doesn't want in my lap. He was like trying so hard to get in my lap, and now he just jumped down. Just picked him up. But the kratom, you know, I had a friend that brought over a little thing because they're like, this is my new workout, like pick me up thingy. And I start reading it and I'm like, you know, there's kratom in this. And he's like, what's kratom?
He didn't even know.
No, he had no idea. So this is pretty scary that these are being like advertised as healthy workout alternatives, or your pre-workout gummy, you know, your pre-workout treatment. And it's a supplement, but it has kratom in it. So
yeah,
do your research, people. Do your research. And just because it says that it has this, that it can do this for you, look at the ingredients.
yes,
Look at the ingredients. Go to Google, even as much as I don't really care for Google that much, but Google does have some good answers out there still.
Yeah. And, you know, the energy drinks is another thing that just popped up on the screen from Lori. And I mean, this, like the gummy bears, the energy drinks are loaded with neurotoxins and dyes. And so you get this combination coming in, and who knows how your body's going to react to it, especially if you're already in, you know, have some things going on. I mean, if you have leaky gut, if you're sensitive to any of these chemicals and you're just bombarding your body with it. And I know that there's been some heart issues happening with folks that are doing these, you know, intense energy drinks. What was the one that was banned? Shoot.
Yeah, I can't remember the one that was banned, but I actually just sent an article about this to my daughter the other day about the caffeine, and that they are finding heart problems. Heart problems are directly linked to the energy drinks.
Right.
Go ahead. I was going to read the studies. So this is the studies that I had sent her. The study classified the adverse effects observed in the entire population as follows. 47.7% experienced cardiac outcomes, including arrhythmias, cardiac-related death, cardiac arrest, aneurysms, and cardiomyopathies. 13.9% had gastrointestinal outcomes such as pancreatitis, hepatitis, or toxic triad syndrome, which is gastritis, hepatitis, and pancreatitis. So all 25.7% reported neurological outcomes encompassing clonic seizures, psychotic events, seizures, retinopathies, and cerebral ischemia. 8.1% exhibited renal outcomes, including acute kidney injuries. 2.3 had gynecological outcomes, and 2.3 displayed dermatological outcomes. So, and this was from Red Bull. This was from the effects of 1 can of Red Bull.
Oh, Red Bull, geez.
So blood pressure increases, heart attacks. And then people are mixing this with alcohol, right?
Yes. And this is, I'm just reading the screen that just came up, and it says beverages that combine caffeine with alcohol, such as Four Loko energy drinks, were a public health concern and could not stay on the market in their current form. Okay, so that's interesting. Well, I don't even know about these drinks, but I know, you know, probably a lot of people listen. Well, not a lot of people, but maybe some people listening do know about it. So yeah, when you're combining alcohol and caffeine, and then whatever dyes might be in there as well too. You know, it's just like the body and the brain are just on overload.
Oh, well, and then not to mention the sugar content that's in them too, that's also damaging.
Yes.
So makes for a wide awake, intoxicated person.
I love that. Okay, well, let's have energy and then
But
be
here,
roughly intoxicated.
yep, let's be intoxicated, have energy, and
Yeah.
we want to
Well,
numb, but we want that high.
yeah. Yes, I know it. I mean, I see a lot of my at this residential treatment center, people, I always ask them what their drug of choice is, and people will say, well, alcohol and then meth, or alcohol and cocaine. It's like, so calm it down, bring it up. It's kind of like that. You want the energy to get stuff done, and then you just need to, chill out. And there are so many ways to do that for our listeners. There's amino acid therapy, there are herbs, there's meditation. There are so many other choices, and you wake up feeling pretty darn good every day. So I hope our listeners take something away from this, that there is a better way, and we really want to work with true allies to our brain and our mental health. And again, that is food, that is connections with each other, that is amino acids and herbs and meditation and therapy work,
Breath work. There's
breath
some
work.
breath work that makes you high as.
I know. I agree. There's some great breath work and as well too. So, well, I think we've covered a lot. I wonder if there's any callers, or if we want to maybe close up the. What are you thinking?
Yeah, do we have? I guess we can open it up for callers and leave it up for 10 minutes, and then.
Yeah.
So we can call. So if you have any questions, we are here to answer at 385-899-2134. So that's 385-899-2134.
Right.
So I want to share a little story about my marijuana use.
Okay.
So I only used for a few years. I used from the time I was 15 to almost 18. And would smoke it every day, all day long. Just loved it, to the point where I was stealing money to support that habit. And once I got pregnant, I stopped smoking. But then in the back of my mind, I was like, I cannot wait until my kids are 18, because when they're 18, I'm going to start smoking again, because I'm not going to lose my kids to weed, because it's illegal. So I'm not going to lose them. And I'd had a friend that ended up going to prison because he was drug dealing, and the informant said that he had a gun attached to his ankle during one of his drug deals. So he ended up with 55 years plus in prison, but he did get out. He did finally get out after appeal after appeal after appeal and writing letters, and he did finally get out. But because I knew that it was illegal, I didn't want to lose my kids to it. But I could not wait until the day that they were 18 so that I could smoke again. So the time came when they were both 18 and they were both gone. They were out of town for the weekend. And I was like, oh my gosh, I waited 20 years, because I had another baby after my first one, but I waited 20 years to get high. 20 years. I was like, oh my gosh, my kids are 18. I can get high. I can get high. So I went over to my neighbor's house, took one hit, and was so sick.
Oh.
So sick that I was throwing up all night. I couldn't even make it home. And I lived right around the corner. Like, I was so sick from it.
So you had the scromiting.
I had the scromiting. I did have the scromiting.
Yeah. Interesting.
So interesting though, how it had attached like that much into my mental capacity to I want to have this again someday, and I'm going to have it again. And then I had it again, and thank God it was toxic for me. Because so if that was happening to my brain, and I've done all this good stuff, like it's just crazy to me that that addiction can still stay there for that long, and you have to really watch it and be cautious of it and continue to feed yourself and continue to feed the brain. And at that point in time, I wasn't taking aminos.
But your body knew. So I think it's so fascinating too that your body had that allergic reaction to just one hit, right? And there you are, like, oh, okay, I do not want to do this because this is not fun, even though you waited 20 years. Wow, I applaud
Also,
you.
like that toxicity too, or the THC levels has significantly increased from the
Yes.
time I'd smoked it.
Yes, of course, 20 years. Yeah. Wow. Fascinating, Jess. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Woo! So glad to be free of it. And we hope if any of you need to be free of it, you can be in touch with us. You can reach us through the Wellness Crusaders site. Wellness Crusaders, what's our email again?
info@thewellnesscrusaders.com.
Yes, please reach out to us. Lonely, what is this?
Our call screener is waiting for calls. We also have the email that they could possibly send questions to as well.
Right.
info@thewellnesscrusaders.com.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes, and I think we get to carry on without substances, and that's just so exciting to be happy and free and to feel balanced, and that's what we hope for you as well too. And so please be in touch with us if you need support for yourself or for a loved one or a friend. That's what this is all about. That's what our show is about, helping give you solutions. And boy, do they work. And I have to tell you, I never thought I wanted to go through life without weed. I was like, And here I am, gosh, 19, almost 19 years later. So consider it, and clean and sober is the way to go, man.
It is.
And happy. I mean, it's all about, having joy in your life as well too, and having those neurotransmitters, because we have all these natural high neurotransmitters. And when they're fed, we are in a good place.
We are in a good place.
So again, we are here to empower lives, inspire wellness, and provide solutions. We are the Wellness Crusaders. So please join us next week, same time, same place. And anything else?
Hey, Patty, can I, Jess, great talk. I loved listening to it. Next week, for our listeners, we are going to be interviewing Dr. Brian Menick. And I'm super excited that we're going to be interviewing all of us, because Dr. Brian Menick is one of the founders of the Utah Physicians for Healthier Lifestyle. And basically, what we're going to be talking about is really the toxins that are in the Great Salt Lake. And as the Great Salt Lake is drying up, what ends up happening in this toxic sand dust that it leaves in the bottom, it contains these herbicides that Kathleen's so passionately talking about, these Roundup, the 2,4-Ds, all the other herbicides, the pesticides, all of the chemical companies that are dumping their toxins into the lake. What ends up happening is now you've got the mercury, the arsenic, and the lead, and all these herbicides. And because it's dust, when the wind blows, where does it go? Jessica and I talked about this. She lives fairly close there, but all of that gets, in the wind. It's like one big dust bowl. And then what it does is it ends up in the neighborhoods, and the house filtration systems cannot filter all of these small molecules out. So we're going to be talking about what his group has been doing.
Good.
Lawsuit that they have against the state of Utah, because nobody is doing anything about it. And now our water is being sent to other developing communities as Utah continues to grow. And it's so toxic to all of those towns and cities. that are around there, from Spanish Fork to American Fork to Outward Justice, all the way down to Salt Lake City where you are, Patty.
Yep.
So super excited
Well, yes. Mm.
to be able to interview him.
Wonderful. And this is about solutions, right? So we're also about learning about what's going on so we can create solutions for a different outcome for our communities. So thank you for that, Lori. And please join us, everybody, because we all need to get involved in this. This is our communities, our homes, our children, our grandparents. Well, I don't have any grandparents alive anymore, but
Well, I do.
I don't even have mother alive anymore, but your grandparents.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Much love. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.